Hello everyone. On this platform of Symposium IAS, I, Ashish Kumar Vasist, welcome you. Now, on this platform, we would be discussing some current affairs issues, burning issues of current affairs, which were meant for the civil services examination and other competitive examination also, which would be followed by flexi modules of environment, ecology, disaster management, science, technology, international relations, among others. And subsequently, this would be also followed by authentic test series designed by the experts. Now, these classes would be both in English and then followed by Hindi medium. So, first we'll deliver in English and then it would be in Hindi medium. Today, we would be discussing a matter of concern, a contemporary issue, which is a matter of concern for all of us. And this issue that we are going to discuss is called as heat waves. There are two terms that you have to know. One is called as heat waves and second is called as heat stress. Remember that the year 2023 was declared as the hottest year ever recorded. And maybe that year 2024 would be passing this record, would be surpassing this record. So gradually the earth is getting warmed and heat waves are a matter of concern for us. But a proper definition of heat waves, a heat wave according to the IMD is what? That's a condition in which the temperature is above 40 degrees centigrade and at least 5 degrees centigrade above normal. That condition would be called as heat wave. And it's not that heat wave would be only witnessed due to intense solar radiation. Heat wave would be also having an affinity for sometimes the cooler regions of the world. So it's not only witnessed in the hotter part of the world, but it's also witnessed in the cooler regions of the world, in the colder regions of the world. So let's see how heat waves can occur in the colder regions of the world. Remember that in the year 2021, there was a heat wave witnessed in Canada, and the temperature of Canada, which rose to roughly about 45 degrees centigrade. Remember that in these areas, the people, they construct their houses for warmth. And if a temperature in this area is witnessed 45 degrees centigrade or above, then they would appear to be sitting inside a pressure cooker, just like a pressure cooker as such. Now, what is the reason behind, first of all, let's discuss what are the reasons behind heat wave in colder regions of the world. And there's a phenomena which takes place in this part, which is called as what? Which is called as blocked weather pattern. Blocked weather pattern, or it is also called as what? Also referred to as omega weather pattern. Weather pattern. It is also called as what? It is also called as heat dome. So let's see how heat dome would be formed and how it is responsible for heat wave. Generally what happens that if suppose there is intense heat in an area, so due to that intense heat, what will happen? The air would become hotter and it would be rising upwards. The air becomes hotter and it rises upwards, becomes less denser and rises upwards. But the atmospheric pressure would be responsible for compressing it downwards. So when it is compressed downwards, the air molecules would be crashing against each other and would be responsible for generating more and more of heat. When we talk about the heat waves that took place in 2021 in Canada and the adjoining regions, it was mainly due to the jet streams. Now you know that if you talk about the jet streams, it's a wind pattern which can be seen, where it can be seen in the mid-latitudinal area in both the northern and the southern hemisphere. So it's known for a steady flow. But sometimes what happens, the jet stream meanders. And if suppose the jet stream, giant meanders of jet streams takes place, if we talk about giant meanders of jet stream taking place, let's talk about the giant meanders. If it happens like this, these giant meanders of jet streams would be referred to as what? It would be called as Rossby waves. Rossby waves. These are giant meanders of jet stream which are referred to as Rossby waves. And because of this, we can see that an omega-like pattern would be formed. This is an omega-like pattern we can see, due to which the hot air from the equatorial area or the tropical region would be moving towards the poles. And when they move towards the poles, they would be trapped in this area. Trapped in this area. Now this would be forming what is called as heat dome. This leads to the formation of heat dome. So let's call it heat dome. And this was the main reason why in the year 2021, heat wave was witnessed in the colder regions of the world like Canada, etc. Now what happens? This is not only called as heat dome, but it's called as blocked weather pattern, because this hot air is blocked by the jet stream. So what can happen is, suddenly the condition outside is of low temperature, but the heat inside cannot dissipate outside. Why? Because of the blocked weather pattern. Neither the condition outside can influence the condition inside because of the blocked weather pattern. And because of this, what happens? The air is also compressed, and what we discussed earlier, the air molecules would be crashing against each other to generate more and more of heat. So this phenomena is referred to as blocked weather pattern, or the omega weather pattern, or the formation of heat dome, which results in heat waves in the colder parts of the world. Colder parts of the world. So that's one type of heat wave that we are talking about. But then the heat wave, along with heat wave, you have to know also another concept. And this concept is that of what is called as heat stress. We have discussed that heat wave is a condition in which the temperature is above 40 degrees centigrade and 5 degrees centigrade above normal, then this condition would be called as heat wave. But heat stress is a condition in which the temperature is above 35 degrees centigrade and the relative humidity, I'm writing here also, and the relative humidity would be above 75%. So this kind of condition would be called as heat stress. And why heat stress? Because generally what happens when we witnessed heat wave in the hotter part of the world, the sweat comes out of our body, and sweat is when sweat evaporates from our body, it's responsible for making our body cooler. But if the relative humidity is also very high, so it disallows the evaporation of sweat from our body and disallows the body to get cooled up. So this condition would be called as what? This condition is called as heat stress, what is being witnessed in India today in the year 2024. And this is also called as wet bulb condition. This is also referred to as wet bulb condition. Because if you are responsible for rubbing a wet cloth over the bulb of the thermometer, then the problem is what? That the thermometer would cool down, and because of the humidity which is present in the surrounding air, the temperature won't be rising. So this is called as wet bulb condition, or it is also referred to as heat stress. Heat stress would be always associated with the survivability threshold. The problem in the definition of IMD is what? That when IMD defines heat waves, it hardly makes a mention to humidity. No mention is made to humidity as such. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. So humidity should also be considered in heat wave. Now the thing is that when we talk about heat wave, who happens to be at risk? Now happens to be at risk the workers who work in the traditional industries, for example, bricklins, those workers, they happen to be at risk. The rickshaw pullers, they happen to be at risk. The old aged person, they happen to be at risk. The children, they happen to be at risk. Now, old aged person, why? Because they fail to adapt to the changing temperature conditions. Children, why? Because the dependency of children is very high on the elders to keep them hydrated. So one can say the delivery boys also happen to be at risk. So all these segments of society happen to be at risk. So that's one thing that you have to know about heat waves. Now the next thing that you have to know also, that what can be done for this purpose. Now the first thing that can be done for this purpose, that we should be responsible for enhancing the green cover. That's one thing, green cover, trees. But remember that planting of trees would be more preferred than planting of grasses or shrubs, because the canopy of tree is responsible for preventing us from heat waves. So that's first thing. Second thing is that we would be also responsible for enhancing the blue cover. Blue cover means the surface water bodies. So that should also be enhanced. If you talk about a city like Delhi, Delhi has lost almost half of its surface water cover and more than 60% of its green cover. And that's why the intensity of heat wave is very high. Definitely one reason for enhancing heat wave is global warming. But there are other factors also. Motor vehicles is also responsible for aggravating the scenario. The heat trapping structures that we have in the urban regions is also responsible. Then refrigeration and cooling. If you talk about refrigeration and cooling is responsible for 10% of CO2 emissions, the data says. So this is also responsible for aggravating heat wave. All these factors. And one factor which is also responsible for aggravating heat wave is the formation of what is called as urban heat island. We know that if we are responsible for establishing concrete structures in the urban area, the vegetation would be definitely lost. And if vegetation is lost, then the temperature of the concrete jungles, the urban area, would be very high, and the surrounding rural area would be very low. So this forms the urban heat island, which is responsible for loss of habitat of species also. Not only it is responsible for heat wave, but urban heat island or the structures that we have in the urban area, particularly the roofs, etc. All these are heat trapping structures which aggravate the heat wave scenario. One thing which can be done is that the urban local bodies, they can play an effective role for heat mitigation plans. See, in India, when you talk about disasters, the High Power Committee constituted by the Government of India identified 5 different kinds of disasters. And in the first category, which is called as water and climate related disaster, heat wave and cold wave have been placed. So they have been recognized. But till date, they have not been recognized by NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, under the Disaster Management Act of 2005. So this needs to be done first of all. Although we see that a lot of states, maximum of the states, they certainly have an action plan for heat wave. They do not have an action plan for cold wave, but they do have an action plan for heat wave. So that's very important. Then one thing that is also important, that when we are establishing the structure, we should consider certain aspects also. One is called as the aspect ratio. Aspect ratio means that it is the height of the building and in ratio to the width of the road. Then second thing which should be considered is the sky view. And sky view means that if we take any point on the road and from there we visualize that how the sky is visible from between the buildings. So sky view factor would also be considered for as a mitigation measure for heat wave. Then also we can see one measure which can be considered, and that is what? That is street orientation. Heat wave also depend upon the street orientation. So all these factors should be taken into consideration when we talk about mitigation of heat waves. The green bonds can be considered also for mitigation. So all these factors can be considered as effective measures for heat wave. Thank you so much. And this is about heat wave. I would be repeating this lecture in Hindi medium also. Thanks so much.